Okay, I'd like to bring the,
Sorry, 1 second. It's, I gotta change the background so that people can actually be seen. Okay, there it goes. Okay, now we're good.
okay, I'd like to bring our special meeting of the Board of Trustees for the library to order at 5 o'clock. I'll take roll. Bob,
Here.
Shauna,
Here.
Kim, here, Teresa,
Here.
Jandy.
Here.
All right,
Oh, wait, do we have any citizen comments?
I was gonna get there.
Sorry. I
Yeah.
thought you were gonna turn.
I don't see anybody in the audience, but do we have any citizen comments online?
No, I don't have any citizen comments, and let me just refresh my email really quick to make sure I didn't get any
Okay,
written.
Do we even have any online participants?
Doesn't look.
Not at this
I don't
moment.
see any.
I was just curious.
No, I don't have any written citizen comments at the last minute either.
Okay. So we can move forward. The purpose of this meeting is to review our joint meeting with the Board of Trustees, or not with the Board of Trustees and the council, and for us to consider how we want to approach the next meeting. So having said that, I'll start over here with Teresa. And Teresa, if you can just kind of, we'll start around like I had suggested earlier, just your takeaways from the last meeting and what you'd like to move forward with.
Yeah, so in my mind, based on how the last meeting went and then discussions, it's one of two routes based on what Spencer and Cargill have said, is that we would either change the ordinance as they've expressed or look into becoming a library district. So I've done some looking through with the RCW, and I know Jandy mentioned she's received email from the state library.
Yeah, state library.
And so we would be, because there's already a Spokane library district, we would have to create a rural partial library district, which would require petition signing of 10% of voters in Liberty Lake and then ballot to get it voted through and possibly be attached to a levy. So it's not as if it's not like creating an LLC where you pop on a website and find it. You have to, it's going to be a lengthy process.
I think-
So
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, so my other thought was if once that's expressed and determined that that's not the route to go, if they choose to continue forward with the ordinance change. Annie Kurtz had suggested adding verbiage in the ordinance that specifically leaves out the collection policy and book reconsideration as part of the council's purview. As that being part of, because they've expressed so much that this is not about banning books, so if that specifically stated in the ordinance that that is protected, that might be something to consider.
Okay, thank you. Kim,
My main takeaway, well, every comment urged the council not to change the ordinance, every single one, 100%. And I don't understand how people can continue to move forward with their agenda when 100% of the community input was to not change the ordinance. I just find that incredible to for them to just ignore everybody's testimony. And I think that we need to find a way to move forward. It sounds to me like a partial rural library district would end up costing the citizens more money because they have to completely fund it on their own.
Even if it would give the signatures.
Right,
Yeah.
that it would end up costing us more money than we're currently. And frankly, I don't even really know how much of my local taxes go toward the library. That should be something I guess I should know. But yeah, it just seems like that would be a more expensive and I think unrealistic avenue to go. And so how do we, we talked about tidying up the ordinance because it needs some tidying up. How do we, I feel like we should be proactive and think about what changes could we live with in preparation for the meeting that we have with them.
okay,
So I feel like, yeah, it's for us to suggest some changes is us doing their job. But I feel like we need to not be reactive and be more proactive here.
I will say, to just to give some input, I was, given some, get privy to some responses from, Cargill and Spencer to some citizens who had emailed after the meeting, just wanting clarification about why they want to change the ordinance. And with as many comments that they received, and, Cargill's response had stated that was just 12 people. That's not the entire constituency. So I think that they believe that their voting pool is such that would support their decision and that it would be the majority of the voting decision in the city. They just didn't show up.
Right, well, I would ask them to supply that evidence. I mean, that really, I would ask them, if that's the way you feel, don't be doing what you always do, and that is give us kind of and sort of give us solid evidence that you have that information.
We hope that whoever got that response from him would be able and willing to come to a meeting and call him out on that publicly, because that's just bizarre that someone would put that sentiment in writing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not okay.
Okay, Shauna,
I came out of the meeting and I just didn't have a conversation. And I think one of the most vocal people in support of changing the ordinance, he elected not to speak at all and save his comments for a venue where we could not have a conversation about it, which was an interesting approach when he was one of the people that called for the meeting. So the format, I think, for the next meeting needs to be different. We need to come to it. I think that I heard them when they said, I felt like we were just trying to change our minds about the policy rather than having a discussion about the policy. Because that was what we had wanted to do was
Right.
to try, I mean, that's what we thought the workshop was about.
Yeah.
Evidently, not everybody thought that's what the workshop was about. So I think that we need to come more in okay, we need to have a conversation about this. I've been doing a bunch of research on the existing codes and ordinances, and so I have some comments on that. And then, you know, kind of maybe putting together some sort of presentation where it's, you know, what are we here to discuss? Is it, you know, is it just the city council is giving us a venue to tell our point of view, but it's not a conversation? Or is the city council open to having a conversation? I agree that it's within the city council's purview to change the ordinance. So, as Chris Cargill suggested, we should have prepared some ordinance changes that we would think would be acceptable.
And my thought too was to take our talking points and maybe even in like thinking now or future. So let's make it thinking now for these people. So taking the information in each talking point and then breaking it down to that's the discussion. So instead of just giving a ton of information, have it broken down to, okay, what about the ordinance do you want to change? And then talk about it together. Okay, what would that look like? And then even in highlighting, well, this is what it takes to create a library district. Talk about that. So that each topic is discussed individually. I think would be more constructive.
Bob, your views, please.
Excuse me. Just, I had a couple in mind and then listening to you guys changed it a little bit. What I can't figure out is what Councilmember Kurtz said, which is if it's not about banning books and it's about and it's not about, having power. So if it's not about the two things that we talk about it being, then what is it? Okay, what is underneath this? Is it one council member trying to, cut the cost? Because if you go back and look at some of the historic discussions about spending money, such as Trailhead, it was historically two council members voting not to fund that. The one thing that struck me, and I just can't put it out of my head, but I don't know how to without, calling it out in the meeting, which may be what we have to do, is to say, is this about being able to say that you cut whatever the budget is for the library out of the city's budget by forcing it into a library district? You can't, that's something that just keeps coming back to me is, why would you bring up the library district as an option when the only real way for that to happen is not what happened with Trailhead, because they didn't have to take it to a citizen vote. A library district, the way I read everything that everybody shared, requires not only do we get 10% of the people living in the community, voting in the community, we also then have to have the actual ballot. But first we have to go to whatever is, I guess, the governing body. That's the only thing I couldn't get out of what Jandy shared today is the governing body the county in this case, because we would not be, part of the city in terms of a library district. And I just have this, nagging feeling that this is about money down the road. Okay, I don't even think it's about money right now, but if it's about money down the road, then we have a larger problem, with spending money to redo the building. So there's that piece. I can't get that out of my head. The other piece is that, it keeps coming back to, they don't think we told them, meaning the collective we, I wasn't here. But that we, didn't tell them what they, what we were doing. We didn't raise our hands and ask permission. So my one thought about that and looking at both, Coeur d'Alene and looking at Kelso and trying to find, I couldn't find any more ordinances on Coeur d'Alene, but other than the city code, but there's a part of me that says if we were to propose changes, that maybe we propose changes around the communication. And maybe we propose, changes in the ordinance that requires, I don't want to require a monthly meeting necessarily, monthly report to the council like Coeur d'Alene does, but, we could say, look at, let's change this to say, because they have a board, they have the same structure we do, but they also quasi involve the council in everything they're doing, whether they do a monthly report, we could do a bi-monthly report, we could do a quarterly report. I don't know what what we've done in the past. It sounds like we've done quarterly. Okay, but so maybe we say, look, we're willing to, one of, the 5 or 6 of us or whatever, on the board, or we're willing to restructure the board so there is one council member who serves as a liaison, because that's what I think both Kelso and Coeur d'Alene do.
We
There's
heard
a-
that, I believe.
Yeah, but I don't know who it is.
It's me.
It is, but no, I mean, a council
It's
member.
not about
Oh,
council
council
liaison.
So
member.
one of them would have to be the-
One of them would have to be, we have a. Yeah, one of them would, the way I read it is one of the council members is a liaison to the board and vice versa. So, there's, those are the things that I came away with is, if we can't get to, is this about, do you think that if we put this to the public, and I'm speaking from the council's perspective, do they think that if they put this to the public, the public is going to overwhelmingly say, we're not gonna support it, because that's what concerns me. Asking for more money when it's in that, 24% or whatever of, I went back and looked at.
It's in the ordinance
Yeah.
of the budget.
Right, but it's also, if you look at the county tax thing, that you get that letter from Baumgartner.
Yeah.
Or Baumgartner all the time, basically, what little Liberty Lake gets, we're even littler or smaller under that amount, so like, my property taxes, I think 24% go to the city of Liberty Lake.
Yeah.
And, we're probably, 50 cents on 1,000, I think it is. Yeah, but we're, of that 24%, we're probably 3%. So is it about the money, I guess, is one of the questions? Or is it about, putting a stake in the ground now so that they can, hammer us later when we need more money?
Okay, thank you. Jandy, I don't know if you're comfortable commenting or not, but I'll give you that option.
I would just say my biggest takeaway was that at our next meeting, we need to have, I like Teresa's idea of like a thought map or something to better facilitate conversation and then have specific suggestions on changes that we are comfortable making.
Okay. So my takeaway is that, there were only one or two people that really came with the idea of having a conversation, from the council members. And actually, one of them even said he was hoping that it would change one of their minds. And I was hoping it would change one of their minds as well. They are dug in. That's the way I came away from it,
Right.
that they're dug in. And they are dug into the point that they will ignore with justification, the comments of a large majority of community members. I know there's more than 12 people who have commented in support of the ordinance as it reads now, without any changes.
My count was 24.
With the written comments.
Yes, I know that. So total. So my count had been at the council meeting, there was 11 citizen comments. And then online written comments, we would receive 14. So I guess that's 25.
Right,
But I do know, I think some of the citizen comments that we had received were after the cutoff.
right,
Because I think at the meeting it was now, so there was 10.
right. And the meeting before that, we had several comments as well.
Before the meeting before, and
Yeah.
there were a couple in a
Right.
meeting
Right.
even further.
So we've had several comments from the citizens. And it seems to be falling on deaf ears. And so I can't help but believe that there is like Bob said, there's an agenda here, that the people that are on the council that are trying to make this ordinance change happen, they're not willing to say out loud. I know they say it's not about book banning. But when you say it's not about book banning, but you want to have control over every book that comes, that a citizen wants to challenge, you want to have control over that, then that leads me to question, really, it's not about book banning? And I know they, as elected officials, they think they should be able to do that. Again, it's ignoring the whole idea of having a board of trustees to take books out of political arena. And they don't seem to wanna, try to understand that, or even give that some sort of, I don't know what the reason is, to be quite, well, I have my own opinion of what the reason is, but, going forward, I agree with Teresa in the fact that we do need to have a talking map, a map. We need to have our points, and then we need Here's another thing that I took away. Jandy gave her thing, asked if there was any questions. Silence on the part of the council. There was no questions asked at all. And they've got to be willing to participate in order for us to have a conversation.
Correct. That's-
And if they won't participate by asking questions or whatever, then the conversation doesn't exist.
No, it's not.
It's not a conversation at all. But we can try, and we'll try again, because it's definitely worth trying about, that's for sure. So I think going forward, we do need to decide what those talking points should be, map out how we want to make it a conversation, so that it forces involvement from them. I also think we need to put, when we have a meeting, we can't put a time limit on it. I don't want a time limit.
I don't think we can do that with public meetings. You need a time.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, you can extend it.
Yeah,
You can
Well,
mention it.
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to have the ability to extend and extend again if we need to. If we- Yeah, and we don't want to have it scheduled when it's butt up to another meeting behind us. That's kind of where I'm coming from. I don't know if you guys
Yeah,
agree with
all
that.
the proposed dates were off due to.
They were off, yeah, I think Andy proposed dates that are off.
Yes, I had, proposed 3 off dates that were alternating Tuesdays. And I had suggested the starting time would be like 6 to 8 with possibility to extend, is how I had phrased it.
Perfect,
So,
okay.
So one thing that I have repeatedly heard from the council is that this, again, it's not about book banning, it's about treating this department, the library as a department, and the board of trustees as a advisory committee. That's what has been termed, all the same as all of the other commissions and councils. And when I look and then the story of all of those councils or commissions are advisory. And so I looked into what are the ordinances and the codes that establish those other city councils, commissions, departments. And so if we go to the Liberty Lake website, there is a list of on the, your government. Just pulling it up, I thought I had the boards, commissions, and committees. The ones listed there are the City Planning Commission, the Library Board of Trustees, the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, the Youth Commission, the Parks and Arts Commission, the Salary Commission, and the Community Engagement Commission. These are all commissions or advisory committee, except for the Library Board of Trustees. When you go to the city code, there is a list of what the code or ordinance. So there is Title I is administration, Title II revenue and taxation, Title III boards and commissions. When you go to that, so I'm trying to establish what are the boards and commissions that they're comparing us to.
Right.
There is the Planning Commission, and there is the Civil Service Commission, and there is the Public Library Board. When you click on that, it says section 852, which is a completely different section, so it doesn't even fall under.
Doesn't fall under.
Then there's the City Tree Board, the Parks and Arts Commission, the Board of Youth Commissioners, and the Salary Commission, and the Community Engagement Commission. Again, the only other board on here is the City Tree Board. All of those in the code and in the ordinance say that they are advisory. They are specifically formed to be advisory to the city council. They do the research, they do the background work, and they give advice to the city council on what the city council needs to decide. The only thing in the library ordinance that the library advises the city council on is interlocal agreements. This library board of trustees is not like the other commissions and councils and even the tree board. We are not an advisory committee or commission. Wendy Van Orem posted on this Liberty Lake community page today that we were a library advisory committee. That is not what the ordinance has established. Sean, the city attorney, confirmed that the city council establishes the budget and the spending, and the library board is the management arm of the library. It is not advisory to the city council. It never was. It is not how it was established. Yet it continues to be compared to every other commission and council. Every other commission and council, the code and the ordinance establishes that they are advisory to the city council. So I can see how in the logic, it seems like a department like these other departments because it has its own board or its own thing, it has employees. But I'm not aware that these other city commissions or councils and boards have a budget allocated to them. Because the city council makes all the decisions on how that budget is spent. The city council makes all of the decisions of should we accept this art that was recommended to be put in the park. That all of them are advisory. The library board of trustees is not, that's not how that ordinance set up. It's not how it's set up in any of the other library board of trustees in the state.
Well, again, they're gonna go back to say, well, then we need to change the ordinance to make it fall in line with all of the other ordinances, and we're the city council and we can do that.
And they can, and if that's what they're going to do, there's absolutely nothing we can do to stop them.
Right.
Short of, I mean, the only way that, because they're gonna rely on 35A,
Which they can.
which they can, you know, and they're, but which is also, even by the resources that they quote all the time, MRSC
Mhm,
has said, there's a conflict here,
mhm.
and the conflict has never been addressed, you know, in the court. It's been addressed, you know, quite some time ago by, you know, the Secretary of State, but it was addressed in a different context. It was addressed that, you know, it wasn't specifically to this, so they, you know, there's a conflict in the RCWs that allows them to do whatever they want to do. And the only way that I think, and I don't think, I'm not even saying that this is something that we would think about, but the only way that that's going to change is if, you know, our wonderful folks in Olympia, you know, either change it and or they get sued, or, you know, somebody sues to say we need clarification. And I'm not advocating that, but that's our problem here is, like you said, they can do whatever they want to do under the guise of that 35A lets us do whatever we want to do.
But yeah, I have some suggestions of what we should bring forward as ordinance changes, because the ordinance is going to be changed. Because this is not about book banning, and it's about oversight of policies. I would suggest that instead of all policy changes have to go to city council for approval, because honestly, we just changed the meeting room policy because they needed to be able to open a room after 15 minutes of not showing up. Having to get approval at the city council level for that just seems a little ridiculous. And it's similar for a lot of the other policies. I would suggest they can, as sort of a compromise of them having oversight, is that, you know, upon unanimous decision, they can override any policy changes to revert it back to the other one, you know, to what it was before it was voted on. And we would report monthly or quarterly on any council changes. So it gives them the oversight that they think as elected officials, they should have over the council or over the board, but it also won't stop the work, the day-to-day management of the library.
So we, in theory, what we would do is still meet, approve any changes, and then at a monthly or week report, we would tell them these are the things we voted on and approved to change. And then they can have the opportunity to vote unanimously to change what we change.
Yeah, they could say, no, we don't, because they even stated 9 times out of 10, we're gonna agree with you. So in that 10th option, if they unanimously agree that that was wrong, the library board had it so wrong in changing that policy, then come back and we have a workshop or
give us
discussion,
specific
or-
recommendations about what they're not happy with, and let us revisit that.
I
So-
think they would take umbrage with unanimous, but
I,
Well,
so here,
that's a suggestion.
yeah, so here's the deal. If that is the way we want to go with the changes to the ordinance, then there has to be a process to resolve a disagreement in what a policy should be. Now, that's where the crutch of it comes in, because if they say, well, you just have to write it the way we want it. I don't know if I don't,
That's where the unanimous comes in. If, and truly, even if the city council changes so drastically that it is far right or far left, and I'm not playing politics here, saying that only one side or the other will want to change it.
right,
If it's unanimous, then truly the library board they missed something in creating that policy.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
And in that case, if the city council can unanimously agree on what that rewrite of that policy should be, then it's something that the library board should seriously consider.
See, I gotta say, I have a little bit of a problem with that, just having sat on different boards and stuff at the educational level. You will get people, instead of bucking what's going on, they'll just say, hey, I'm just gonna go along with the group because I don't wanna have to fight it anymore. I find that a little bit of it could be a problem. I mean, we could be, you know, I don't know, I just have a hard time. with it.
Then that gets, it's accountable back to the voters. We cannot Right.
You're right. Yeah,
a
no,
unanimous decision of the city council. That's not what our job is.
I agree.
even if you had a majority plus one.
Yeah.
I mean, you
That's-
probably would have to,
that's
you would
the-
probably have to, you'd probably have to give back to that, because a couple of them that I read, you know, had majority plus one of the, you know, of the council. A couple of them, or one of them had unanimous.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if we go down that path, unanimous is the way to go, but, you know, yeah, the other thing, and I see where you're coming from, Brad, and I don't know how we address it, because if it's not about book banning, okay, then that resolves it a little bit. If it's about accountability, then, you know, then that resolves it. Maybe it's just language that says, you know, if anything that, you know, if the board and the council cannot agree on whatever, you know, action or decision was taken, that any citizen can bring it to the council, and that holds it another direction, because right now, I don't think there's really anything other than citizen comments where a citizen can say, I want, I've got 100 of my friends who don't like this decision that Bob Scott made, and I want the council to consider removing him. I don't think there's a methodology for that in the city.
No, but there's no methodology for any of the,
But I mean, that's another way to play it, is to say,
But
yeah,
that's,
we'd be willing to, any policy that we approve and put into place. And if we don't go this other direction, is, you put in there that it's subject to citizen appeal.
well, appeal to
The
who, the
council.
city council, because it's already gone to the city council.
why couldn't we just propose this? They can have oversight over our policies, but both the city council and the board of trustees, it has to be written, we want this written in the ordinance, that neither one has the authority to ban books. Period.
My suggestion was based on what Annie Kurtz said, is if they have oversight of our policies, except for the book collection policy and the book reconsideration policy.
So,
That's one policy.
Okay,
yeah,
yeah, so, yeah,
I don't, one, that's not gonna, they're not gonna go for that. Two, because that's the only policy that
but if
is
it's not,
I'm concerned. I like, yeah, I do have, because it was requested that we come with 2 to 3 suggestions. I like your suggestion of a unanimous or majority plus 1. That's a great sort of discussion point. All of the red lines that I've been working on have also had an additional clause added that to provide the highest level, this is taking language from the paragraph before, if this is the section 2, the language before, the one that says where we are advisory. It says to provide the highest level of library service to the citizens of the city of Liberty Lake, the mayor and city council, with the advice and recommendation of the board of trustees, shall exercise best efforts to negotiate and enter into interlocal or other agreements with public and private library service providers. Next paragraph, to provide the highest level of library service to the citizens of Liberty Lake, as well as to adhere and support the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. These are all in our collection development policy. The Library Bill of Rights, American Library Association, the Freedom to Read Statement, parentheses, American Library Association, the Freedom to View Statement, American Library Association, and the Washington Library Association Intellectual Freedom Statement, taken together principles. The city council or mayor will not ban or restrict access to library books or content that is added to the library collection utilizing these guiding principles. If it's not about book banning, there should be no problem accepting into the ordinance that books will not be banned or access restricted as long as the guiding principles of the First Amendment and all of the other principles that we list that are listed in the collection policy. My concern with oversight of policies is then you change the collection policy to remove First Amendment and remove all of the ALA statements, the freedom to read, and the Bill of Rights and all of that. If that happens, then what are we basing the policies on?
Well, we can't agree to that. I mean, they can do that if they want to, but we can't agree to it.
No.
And we just have to say it, can't agree to that, but that's your prerogative, then you have to answer to all these people. But I like that, but again, that's putting the onus on them about banning books, and I don't, because an appeal process would not come to them at all when it comes to asking a book to be reviewed and to be taken off the shelf, which is what they want to have. They want to have that ability to have a constituent bring a book to them if they don't agree with our decision or our library director's decision to them, to have them do the final review process. Now, I might be going out on a limb here, and I might not be saying this, but I don't think but maybe one or two people on that council will spend the same amount of time that all of us spent
Yeah.
reviewing that book and reviewing its reviews and its accolades and adhering to the ALA, our First Amendment rights. I would say that not all that could or would happen. It should happen, but,
And taking their personal opinion about that item
right,
off the table,
off the
which
table.
was a serious problem.
Right, and I think that's the whole danger here, and that's why I understand what you're saying. I know, I get it, but we have to come up with the ideas. They also should bring some ideas, and if they don't bring some ideas, I'm gonna be pretty upset. Because they need to come with ideas as well as we do, and I know there's a couple, because I've talked to a couple already that have some ideas, and Teresa's already had that. Have you had a conversation with that particular council person that you're mentioning about the,
Annie Kurtz.
Yeah.
She said it publicly.
oh, publicly, okay,
Said it in the meeting.
that mean, got it. So, well, anyway,
Which thing did she say that you're referring to?
Oh, adding, if it's not about banning books, that we need to add something in the ordinance. saying
Okay,
we
right,
are-
right.
right, which I agree with, and, I think they will have to say whether or not they're okay with that. And if they're not okay with it, well, then obviously it's about banning books.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
And-
then they've shown their hand.
And that's why I want it specifically in the law.
Yeah.
I want them to go on record saying, I don't want that in the ordinance because I believe we should be able to be in those. Because otherwise, why would they have a problem putting that in the
Okay,
ordinance?
so can I-
The only thing that accomplishes that particular piece. But if we allow for complete oversight of our policy outside of controlling the budget and the ability to remove us, we somehow have to come back to the fact that they already have the authority to remove any one of us.
Mhm.
You know, the mayor and the council. I don't remember what the vote has to be.
It just has to be majority.
I think it's
They can remove this whole,
You know, so I mean, that to me is also something that we have to keep hammering home. Is you already have this authority. If it's not about banning books, then why are you trying to
Right.
change this authority?
Sorry, Bob, can we do this? Can we start making a list?
I already made it out. like-
Well, no, I mean, a list of our map that you're talking about. So I would like to say there are certain things that we need to address before we even come up with some idea. Because there have been some things that have been said that need to be addressed. And I think one of the things is that we were not transparent. That's one thing, and I don't know, you guys may not agree with this, but I think this is one thing that we have to have a conversation about with the board, that we were not transparent. Because I believe we were.
Yes.
I believe we were very transparent, because it's like them saying, it would be like me saying, well, you guys weren't transparent about the trailhead. I would be an idiot, because I can go to the city library, I can look at every council meeting, and I can get all the information, just like happens for us. And so to say that we weren't transparent is disingenuous in my mind. I think we need to, pardon?
Well, it was only,
And it's
it was only
inflammatory.
one council.
Huh?
It was only one council.
Well, no, there was another one that said that again today on her Facebook page. So it's not just one.
Now, I didn't read that in there. Maybe I didn't read it quickly.
You want me to read it?
No, I can.
Okay, I'll read her last statement
Well,
about
her
being
last statement,
transparent.
Yeah, it was about, no, that was her referring to the same thing that she sat here and said, which is we all need to get together. And, I think she was trying to have it both ways, saying that she's willing to sit down and be transparent. But
Okay, maybe I misread it,
I
Bob.
don't know, we're both entitled to different opinions.
Sure.
But
You got it. I agree.
I don't know, because I wasn't here. Okay, so.
Right.
But the other council member, that brought it up originally, that set this whole, fiery wheelbarrow full of whatever rolling downhill. Said that he went back and looked at
So,
library board meetings
Right.
and that that he felt that there was an attempt not to be transparent.
I agree. I heard that. I agree
Okay,
with that.
so that's the only part I heard.
Well, here, let me read this to you. The board plays an intricate role in how the library is managed. We have always had a transparent process within the city until October. What does that say?
It's not to be transparent.
It says that we were not transparent,
I agree.
which I have a very difficult time with, especially when it's posted in social media.
There was something posted as well. No, I agree that I didn't catch that subtext. There was something else posted where, I don't remember if this is when I went back and listened to it again. Somebody was saying that this is never, she's been arguing, the Councilmember Van Orman's been arguing that it was always this, okay? And somebody responded in one of those, whether it was a post, and I'll have to go back and look for it, or it was on one of the meetings, responded that, no, it's not always been this way. The policies were brought up, nobody questioned anything.
I brought that up. In 2019, I looked up the meeting minutes of when the last policy changes were brought forward to the council. And then I watched that whole meeting, and it was 2 sentences. We're reviewing the policies, we're deleting the ones that don't apply, we're going through 2 to 3 a month.
And I know the mayor has made that same distinction multiple times.
She has.
She did it in the meeting that we had last week, and I think she's done that in 2 or 3 other meetings
Yeah.
previously.
She has.
I also found, this is from January of 2019, a library report where they reported that they had made extensive changes to our customer service policy. And it had nothing about approving it, it was just, we spent so many months on this policy because it's our customer service and we want to make sure we're taking it seriously.
So,
And that was the end of it.
so do we want to even address this or just let it go?
I don't know, I feel like I don't want it to go into the realm of Aaron.
Okay, cross it off. I'm good.
I guess my suggestion would be if we are bringing up suggestions of, 2 or 3 suggestions of new things that we could do.
Yeah.
And they're concerned that we were not transparent enough. Would the suggestion be, when we have our monthly reports, by every couple month reports, quarterly reports, we say, we are now looking at our meeting room policy. Here's a copy of our current meeting room policy. And then we come back a couple months later, hey, these are all the red lines of all the changes that we've been making to our policy. So they have in a meeting,
Sure.
we're doing this.
Or we could split the fact that Tom, one of the council members, came to our meetings.
I like,
Just because
I really,
Or the liaison, where then the council liaison can let the council know,
They
Hey,
also
there's a
sit there and
policy.
report about the STA and everything else. So, then, I mean, I'm not gonna name specific councilmen, but hopefully they would, I mean, it could go either way. They could appoint somebody who was pro-library, they could appoint somebody who was pro-power.
they're not a member, they're
But,
there
yeah,
to observe.
right, but either way, I'm willing to accept that, and it's kind of, if we say that since we have been accused of being not transparent,
Mhm.
then we want written in the ordinance a requirement for us to report, because that's not in the current
Mhm.
ordinance other than once a year,
the annual report,
the
yes.
annual report. We want a requirement in the ordinance for the library board to update the council on a bi-monthly, I like every 2 months versus.
Yeah.
Every 2 months of activity so that they can, they will be aware and can't accuse us like Mayor Pro Tem Follier did of this first I've heard about any cause.
Mhm.
And that way, if you put it, if we suggest that, then, they can't really fight the transparency thing because we've suggested putting it in the ordinance. If you don't want to report from us every 2 months, then be quiet and go home.
Well,
Our
and
policy, well, we had it in our, we'd have to change our bylaws, because our bylaws say every quarter.
okay.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, when we did report in October, was it about the ordinance change or the policy change?
Mhm.
Everything that you're suggesting
October.
we included was included.
Mhm.
We said, we made a change to this policy. That, like, I don't know what more we could do to be transparent because everything's public. We do have city council members that attend multiple meetings. I really do like the idea of having a city council person
So how
as an
about this?
observer.
I just think the sticking point was that we didn't ask permission.
So do we need to address the transparency? That's all I'm asking.
Yeah,
Do we
I think-
need to address that, not by calling people out, just by listing what we did that we believe was being transparent, and then giving the option for more transparency, if that's what they choose to have and how we'd like it to read in the ordinance.
Yeah, I would say, I would give both suggestions as either bi-monthly reports or a council liaison.
Well, I think we need to have
That's two options.
To increase transparency
Right.
right there.
because then nobody can say, you know, in an effort to increase transparency, we need this and this. I
Got it.
think it's two separate.
So my thought is for I'm on the out, I'm creating the thinking about outline. So we want to address council concerns, and then under council concerns are the board transparency with our 2 suggestions of how to fix that. The other was what Shauna was talking about, because they've stated a lot that because we are elected officials, we need oversight of the library for our constituents. And mentioning that the board is not a commission, because that's within the same sentence, they're saying, well, just like everybody else, we have all this oversight. So identifying to them why that we are not a commission, we're not an advisory board, and how that is different.
So, okay, hang on, want to clarify. So first of all, we're gonna address concerns, and one of them was transparency.
Transparency.
Okay,
with 2
So
suggestions.
before we go any further than that, what other concerns have they expressed to us besides the transparency thing? That have they? I'm just asking, besides
They haven't really been transparent about what their concerns are.
I don't know, yeah, I mean, I've heard them individually say things that they didn't like about the school.
Or the policy.
Yeah, like, for example, Judge Spencer had suggested, you know, can we just not let minors see it? Someone else has said putting it behind the counter.
right?
Have they not been told that we can't do that?
Yes,
We have.
many times, if they've been told that that's outside the lines of the ALA and actually First Amendment rights and the Freedom to Read Act, they've been told that many times. So I'm not sure if we are making any forward progress by readdressing that concern, unless they bring it up.
There's already an adult section of the library.
I know, I get it. Yeah,
As a teacher, when someone tells me I can't do something, which I mean, I listen to like legally, oh, I can't do that.
Well, and what
Even like
else,
posting things on Facebook.
yeah, what else goes in that section? Is it all the romance novels? Is
No,
it,
it's pedophile.
I know. Behind the
Behind-
shelf.
behind the
Oh.
shelf, kids Can't check it.
Yeah.
right,
It's like Sudafed.
right. Yes, I suppose
The
you,
D,
I suppose you could do that.
D,
So, so we have the transparency thing, to make it a conversation instead of this being a one-way thing and telling them why we thought we were transparent. We need to be able to have a conversation about that, so I think we need to ask them to list, or at least give us the reasons. I think that's okay, it's okay to do that, if they could just give us the reasons why they believe we weren't transparent in the review of this policy. and changing of the policy. Do you think that is that okay with you guys? I mean,
I just don't know.
well, but Bob, this is a conversation. They have to be asked to.
Well,
We thought the last meeting was a conversation.
you know,
But
I mean,
My-
and then the only thing, let me walk through this for a second.
I got it.
But
I'm just frustrated.
no, we're all frustrated because
I get it.
this is taking up way more time.
Pay for this, we
Yeah,
know.
get more time and energy, I agree.
I'm sitting real pretty.
Yes, you won't.
But there's a part of me that, you know, no matter how we go about this, it's gonna become, you know, it's either gonna devolve into pointing fingers and name calling. And we don't want to do that, but I'm just, you know, I go away every time, and this was even before I was on this board. I go away from these meetings, council meetings, whatever reason I attend, thinking that, you know, we're dealing with some people who just have to be heard throwing things out because they believe that that's what they were elected or appointed to do. And so I hear what you're saying about me. If we tell them, and I just want to play this through, if we say, okay, tell us why we weren't transparent. Okay, and they say, well, you didn't ask our opinion of the policy, or you threw this on us, you know, and tried to sneak it into a, you know, a presentation where you talked about numbers. I don't know what that accomplishes and how you respond to it. I mean, I've always,
agree.
you know, and other than, you know, and other than, then we all are, you know, saying, okay, we thought we did this, they thought they were doing their job, and, you know, the only next question you can say is that, okay, so what are we gonna do about it? So my perspective would be, why don't we just say, look, there seem to be some concerns about communication and transparency. Maybe if we put that together instead of having them separate, and forget my, you know, Cool Hand Luke reference, you know, but just go down the path, there seems to be that, and we propose this and this as possible solutions. Do you have a different solution?
I like that.
Then I think nobody
That's a
can,
good.
nobody can say that
That's a very good suggestion.
that we're-
A better way to
we're
do it.
trying to drag it up. I mean, I would love to hammer this social media thing, you know, with a huge sledgehammer.
Right.
Okay, and I would love to point out to them that they're not currently following the code of ethics that was established relative to this. However, that's like, you know, me sitting there taking shots at Pete, you know, Mayor Pete and Joe for not showing up in Palestine.
Right.
It's gonna be taken, you know, okay, you don't agree with us, you know, you think you can do it better, you don't have the opportunity. So that's why I want to go down more of this path of, this is what we're proposing. You asked us to bring proposal. This is what we're proposing. What do you think of that?
Okay, see if I can paraphrase what you said. So under transparency,
Yeah, I said it.
you got it?
Yeah.
And-
Okay, say it then. for me.
So, under transparency, there seems to be concern regarding transparency between the board and council. We've come up with a couple of suggestions,
Sure.
creating a liaison, adding ordinance requiring bi-monthly reports of activity.
Perfect. Thank you, Teresa.
The second concern,
And we could add to that, Teresa, we could add similar to how other commissions report.
Okay.
Okay, because, you know, it seems like, you know, community engagement and our planning commission every month, you know, so
I feel like community engagement definitely does. I don't think the planning commission
planning only does maybe,
once a quarter.
and then Parks does, I've seen Parks do it like every couple of months.
Yeah.
Parks and Arts,
Mm.
you know, or when they have something, and Mark Saba always seems to be talking, but he's in like 4 different
Yeah.
commissions.
He's got a lot of
Well,
different.
in the community engagement committee, I mean, they pretty much during every public comment, give updates on what they're doing.
I wish there was a way we could work that in as well. the community engagement thing. I don't know where in this process, if, if it, because they might punt it back to Zen City. But if we really, if we really want the community's viewpoint on this, not necessarily about this ordinance change, but we somehow incorporate using the community engagement or Zen City, to allow the citizens the ability to comment on any of our reporting.
Well, I do know Mark has brought that up to Jandy, but I think it's all within the Zen City thing, because we were talking, I don't know if you remember, we had talked about when we start planning for the new library, which I've completely forgotten, that's also one we're here. But putting out a survey to the community about what would you like to see? Mark had said, oh, when we get the new Zen City up, we can push out a survey to do that one. So it might just become part of.
Yeah, I was just, that's
Yeah.
the thing that somehow I want, not only being us saying that we're willing to be more transparent by codifying this.
Yeah.
But would you also be, willing to, use the Zen City platform to ask your constituents for feedback?
Yeah.
Relative to issues like we're discussing.
Sure. That's a good suggestion and option. So, before we go any further, do we need to address the, library district before we even start to give our suggestions for ordinance changes? Should we do that first?
So my thought was that we would go over, address their concerns and our suggestions, how to fix their concerns. And then, because I do know based on, Councilman Carville's responses to community members and at the meeting, that they are going to want to discuss the library district as the only option, I think.
Well, he actually asked our attorney to come back with some information for our joint meeting on the district. So should we make that a point of discussion at the very beginning of the meeting to put that to rest, or to,
I was thinking we would just, well, I did think we would discuss it before we jump into our ordinance suggestions, because it's gonna go in two directions. Either they push for the library district, or then they say, okay, well, then we can't do that. We're just gonna go with the ordinance.
So the city council can't push for a library district.
No.
They
Well-
can't, if this is something that the community would have to bring up as a referendum for election. The city council can defund the library.
Okay.
And that would force the issue, but they can't push for the city to start a library district.
So the petition
So
would
that's-
come from city council.
So it has to be
Okay.
completely grassroots.
I think so.
yes,
Okay.
so that's what I'm asking. Should we put that to rest before we even get started into anything else? Because that's gonna come up. It's gonna be brought up, and maybe that should be addressed before we go any.
I think we can say, look, if the community wanted and wants, then that's something that the community would have to do, but it's not a city council decision, and it's not something to be discussing at this juncture. This is not a quick fix. This is not something that would be able to happen this year.
Well,
So-
there's tremendous support for the library in this.
Yeah,
When
there
I came
is.
onto the board, there was that great report from the consultant that kind of got waylaid because of COVID and everything, but, we have great participation in our library programs and great support.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
just,
I think that it makes sense to address it in that
Because they're gonna bring.
the
it up.
immediate need in front of us is this ordinance.
Right.
Separately, we've heard discussion of a library, changing it to a library district. That's a separate issue. And that's not a city council issue. It's not,
I think they see it as one.
well, the only way they can force it is by defunding the library.
They'd have to, and one of the things that I read today, they would have to not only defund the library, but they would have to basically disband the library. And, and then the one question in that whole thing is who is the governing body that the petition of 10% of the citizens has to be taken to,
The district.
Oh, no, it's the county commissioners,
is it the county commission,
it's the county governing body.
even a partial?
Yeah, even the partial rule has to go to the county
So it'd have to
government.
go to the county government.
And then they have to hold a public hearing, and then they decide actually if they want to put it on the ballot. That's the way I read it.
So,
You can get our library.
So it's not so it's not an easy thing.
so is the way to approach it then to say, I mean, because I hear what you're saying, do we say it up front or we wait till later? And maybe we just say, you know, I mean, maybe Sean will have to weigh in. But our initial research shows that, you know, creating a library district involves way more than we have time to discuss
This
tonight
year.
Well,
in this meeting, and therefore, we want to bring forward some of our solutions.
Well,
Yeah,
and I will say regardless of whether we gloss over it and then jump into the ordinance suggestions, whether we do an in-depth presentation about what it means, regardless, I do know that there are council members that are going to bring that.
sure.
Going to want to discuss it with the.
So in my opinion, I'm gonna give my opinion, I think that's the very first thing that should be addressed. Is that that you don't have to agree with me. I'm just giving my opinion. And then you guys can weigh in and agree with me or not. But in my opinion, that should be addressed and put to rest as something that cannot be that, okay, that library district is gonna take a lot more effort and research on everyone's part, if that's the road you want to go down. We would prefer to focus on 20 years of a very successful library and address the ordinance the rest of the way. That's the way I would like to approach it.
Well, and I don't think they're gonna listen to any research that we've done. I think
Yeah.
Mhm.
The attorney is coming in.
Well, that's what, if you do it that way and then say, yeah, and we give Sean a heads up,
Yeah.
you know, too, Sean, you're gonna have to respond to this
Right.
because it's not our place
What if we could?
as a library board to.
First thing, like, hey, once we get started, can you just bring up, let's first talk about the suggestion.
Sure.
And then we can jump into council concerns and our ordinance suggestions.
Right.
I
So
think
then,
that's a great way to approach it.
so we've got our, I'm going to address their concerns. And the way that Bob suggested we take care of the transparency issue,
Mhm.
they're concerned about transparency. And then the next thing is they're concerned about the ordinance. I mean, about the policy.
Policy review.
Yeah, and there,
But we've already addressed that. We addressed that at the last meeting. We told them how we went.
well, one concern that Phil keeps mentioning is the reason that he wants the orders, he's looking for the ordinance changes, because he feels that as an elected official, that he needs more oversight for constituency. Like he does, like they have with all of the commissions. And so then my suggestion in that, addressing that specific concern is to highlight how our board is not an advisory board or commission. I figure Sean has to speak more on that. You did that. Like, oh,
Okay, so we can go to, how do we put that down? And so we're gonna do the transparency thing. Then the second thing is we wanna kick it to you for the oversight.
Like, and then.
We need to
other
treat it
things.
as all of the other departments and the
Right.
commissions in the city.
Right.
And then I can go line by line. This commission is established
Got
by
it.
this ordinance in this code. And the first paragraph says they are advisory to the city council. The second one is this, like, it's just the facts.
So, and the reason I
Right.
bring that one up is because on the same sentence, it is not about banning books. They immediately say, this is about us being the elected body and needing to have. So if we address that, then that kind of takes away, that addresses their primary concern.
Oh,
It's not about-
if we address, what we're addressing it in reverse.
It doesn't really address their primary
No,
concern.
but if we address it, like we said, we're not gonna address the, you know, unless the attorney has something he can add to it. We don't think that we're gonna resolve this by forming a library district. So then we wanna talk about the issues you had.
Right,
Transparency and communication, which is that one catch-all. Then you say, then you talk about the.
Treating it like the other
Treating it like, yeah,
commissions.
highlighting it, treating it like another commission, or the other commissions. And then the other issue is the policy review.
Yeah,
Specifically, the
And then-
collection, because if you just say policy review, it's like we're saying, we don't want you to override us on anything. But if you say you had a concern about your ability, to review our policies or review our decisions regarding policy, specifically related to the collection policy, which includes what books and resources get put on the shelf. That way, we're kind of reversing it. We're going transparency, why we can't be treated like somebody else because you've got way too many ordinances to say you don't. And then the third one is, and then let's talk about policy. Do you want to review every policy? And that's where we could then go back to the issue of if somebody has a problem with the policy, the council could, force it back into,
Force it back to,
force
upon unanimous.
revert.
And give us
with
specific,
upon,
specific guidelines
Right.
that are not,
and that brings that
do
whole
not meet.
that whole thing right back to the end.
Okay, so I'm trying to get my head around, so we got, the library district and then the library district's like to resolve the problem that we have, okay?
Yeah.
It's a separate issue. Then we got the transparency concern we're gonna address,
Communication issues.
and communication issue, transparency / communication. Okay, and then we're gonna go to the why we
We're not
can't,
like
why
every-
we're not like every other
Yeah.
commission. Okay,
Differences to other.
and then we're gonna act, but we have to make it a conversation, so we have to make sure that they get a chance to weigh in on those things. Okay, and then 3, is the,
Concern regarding policy review specific to the collection policy.
concern
Number 4.
specific to the collection policy. So we did that though. So what are we gonna do again with that?
Yeah,
Because we already, I mean, that we gave Jandy gave a great overview.
They're not asking for review of the
No.
collection policy. They're asking for approval of all rules and regulations and bylaws.
Everything.
That's what's on the table right now. We're suggesting limiting it to policies, but limiting it to not approval, but revocation upon unanimous vote. Because we cannot stop the day-to-day management of the library, and that's what those policies are there for. And it's very specific. It's for the management of the library. So I think we just need to make it clear that we're not against them saying, look, I think you really missed the boat with this policy change. Something is drastically wrong with it, and we need you to revisit it. Every city council member approves. We go back and we revisit that with the new knowledge that we have based on that, the feedback we received. But, and in the interim, it reverts back to the policy before we voted to change it. I mean, these are simple, like, how would that work? Because we're going to start using the new policy of, yes, you can clear out the room after 15 minutes of a no-show immediately upon the board. We're not going to wait for city council approval. That's why it's a revocation.
So then our issue is there, that bullet point is not about policy, it's about oversight.
Yeah, which is what they've said this is about. This is about oversight because they are the elected officials.
Yeah.
And they need oversight because.
And
they
that's
were
exactly
the
what we call it, Teresa, is oversight by
Okay, so
elected body.
So,
concern regarding oversight.
so we've got transparency, we've got why we're not like other commissions, and then it's oversight
Oversight by elected body,
by elected
By elected body.
officials.
because we have oversight.
And
Okay,
you want me to be of all library policy function regulation. Correct? Or just leave that?
Just leave it at policies. They've said it's just about policies. We're gonna limit it to policies.
Now, here's my question, because it was stated, are we gonna assume that they did their homework? Because it was stated by a couple of council members during the public meeting that they didn't read the entire ordinance.
Yep.
So do we need to read the ordinance as it stands as a group, so people know what it sounds like?
I think that we don't need to read the whole ordinance, but as we are making suggestions to it, we read those sections. Look, this is what is currently the city council and mayor's responsibility. this is currently what the board's, this
So-
is what we're suggesting as potential edits, because you've asked for us to give you potential
And
edits.
if we're talking about oversight, we can also, we can also say that you already, that's where we also say you already have.
You already have oversight.
By structure, you already have oversight over the board of trustee activities. Because you can get rid of this.
Yes, but we brought that up and they
We
said
brought
that's
that
not.
up.
Yeah, I think we need to,
I think we should bring
I
it
think we
again.
need to bring it up again, as opposed to, so you as a representative of the elected, or you're the elected representative of the community, you have the ability to take action.
Just like citizens have the ability to take action by voting.
Right,
in
but so you have the, we still are, by that structure, we are still beholden to the citizens. I think you just have to weed.
Mhm.
So
That-
my question is, so when we address that concern regarding oversight by elected officials over all library policies, then do we just segue right into our ordinance suggestions, or what are the suggestions? Okay, so
Yeah.
then from there, I have ordinance suggestions. And one of them is, instead of all policy changes need to go to council for approval, to state upon unanimous or majority plus one approval.
Well, I would just say unanimous.
I would just say,
Say
yeah,
unanimous.
don't give them the
Yeah,
other
that's-
option.
That's a discussion. for me,
Yeah.
But
That we just need to know we have a policy.
Okay. On unanimous approval, they can override policy changes. And then the other suggestion was report monthly and quarterly and policy changes, and that was up in the first concern about transparency. And then another suggestion was the added clause that you mentioned.
yeah, about no banning books.
Yeah, I don't think we have to, I think you just talk about the ordinance changes within the bullets. So we talk about the ones up above in the transparency communication.
Mhm.
We would just say, this is what we would recommend as an ordinance change. And then when we get down to the oversight, that's where you talk about the unanimous. And I wouldn't say override, I would say overturn. That was
Yeah.
the word Shauna used before. Because
Override.
if override says, then you gotta have that whole policy and process. If you override it, what do you replace it with? If you say overturn, the worst we lose
It goes back.
is it goes back to the previous policy.
Well, if they're gonna overturn a policy, I would like specific, like, notes or suggestions about why.
Right.
So that when we go back and revisit it, we have some direction.
Do you want me to put that in here? So,
Yeah, because
Yeah, I think overturn, a unanimous overturn has to be accompanied by specific,
Direction.
direction and reasoning of direction as to what changes need to be made.
because,
That
So-
forces them on the
so-
record.
right,
directions, suggestions, and logic?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I like that.
I mean, they told us to go back and revisit, they wanted us to revisit the collection development policy after the council voted to uphold the board of trustees. That part of that conversation that night, that was my first meeting.
Oh, yeah. back
They
in-
told us to go revisit the collection development policy and we did, but they didn't really give us any specific direction.
No,
so-
they did. They, just in the conversation, they had, brought up some of their concerns. One was, minors having access to books.
Right, right.
Should books be put behind the shelves? Our selection criteria, the number of items that we look at. They had concerns that you could, when selecting a book, that you only had to meet one criteria.
Right, right.
The book reconsideration policy, a lot of council members have said, we don't want to be doing this. Why is this coming to us? I took that as feedback also.
Yeah, so then,
So-
that's why it doesn't go to the city council now.
Okay, so we probably can get out of here in about 10 minutes. I hope. So transparency, we're gonna address those concerns, ask if they have any other concerns. We're just gonna tell them what we hear their concerns are, right? Okay, then the oversight part, Shauna's gonna go down the list with a comparison to the board of trustees and other commissions, why we're not the same. Okay, and ask or any questions about that from them? Do you have questions about? Or we can just say why you can still, anyway, it's gotta be a conversation somehow. And then number 3, I'm not completely, is also oversight by elected officials. So I've got 2 oversights. So what do I?
So, yeah, so we should have, the first one's transparency and communication. The second one is differences to other commissions,
Okay,
however. The third is concerns regarding oversight by elected officials on all libraries.
got it, okay. And then the 4th one is our suggestions for edits to the ordinance. Okay,
I think they get woven in through it. I don't know how you address. I don't know how you address the transparency communication without saying this is the change. The change would be needed in the ordinance.
I think it can definitely be woven in. We can either make, what we have to present some ordinance changes, one of our suggestions without going into it, but during that point of the conversation, one of our suggestions is having the city council member appointed,
right,
getting more often
right.
reports. Like, we have some suggestions that we can discuss in detail later, or we can discuss them now.
It could, if anything, the 4th one could serve as a reiteration of those previous ones. And then
Right.
in
Yeah.
addition, these are the other changes. So we just hit it twice.
Yeah, because I don't think there was anything else we wanted to put in the ordinances.
Just that we can't.
Right. And but that addresses the oversight.
Yeah.
Piece. I mean, that's saying,
That's, yes, because this is not about banning books, we have added to, because the community is very seriously concerned, as evidenced by all of the comments and the people showing up. Every time there is something about the library, a huge number of community members show up in support of the library for the way it is currently structured. It wasn't just the last meeting.
Right.
They've repeatedly commented on how many people from the community show up
Over the last year.
over the last
basically.
year.
Yeah.
Because this is not about banning books and to make the community feel better, like they are being heard, we suggest putting in that the city council won't ban or restrict access to content as long as these policies, the First Amendment, right, are, you know,
The
all
way
of
you
those
wrote it is.
are followed.
Yeah.
And
I
this-
did, it was in already, but I'll send it.
Yeah, you sent it to us already.
Yeah,
And
but-
that's worded perfectly. I think it's done very well. The only thing I think we get a suggestion from them with, and it's fair, is that not just the council, but the board of trustees would ban the book, but we're not
I'm
going to.
happy to have that added to that
it
section.
can be useful.
And that affirms what our community is saying, it affirms what the board is saying, and it also prevents the city from possible lawsuit.
Yes,
Right.
The argument with nothing presents.
still needs to be heard. As far as this book concerns me, and this is why, and this is what we suggest to replace it. If
Oh, I see.
there are valid reasons and there are valid suggestions for replacing it, then that book, we should, as a
Yeah, should
library
consider.
board, seriously consider.
Yeah.
I like the idea of adding, library board as well. In terms of that, because of the fact that council does have the power to get rid of us and replace us, we want to make sure that if anybody else is in this position, that they also will want it.
Right.
Even though logically they were not going to.
And that was the citizen concern, that
Hey,
maybe
council in
you
the
all feel
future.
this way, but what about 5 years down the road?
Right.
Don't open the door is what someone just said.
Exactly.
So I think that
We need to
addresses
think of it not being just now, we need to think about it being
100 years from now.
100 years.
I think, and
50.
that way we can also, because that's my biggest concern about the oversight piece, is that, okay, we win on the banning books. And like that article you had from New Jersey,
And so
but we
we
lose
can't-
in the bigger battle because every time we ask for $1 for a new chair,
It's denied.
it's denied because they have oversight.
Well, and it's interesting. I noticed at, gosh, I don't remember which city council meeting it was, but there was a report in the council, or the council packet where it was a summary of what priorities every city council member gave to the budget items. Almost every council member gave, and I think it was out of what, 15? Almost every city council member gave the library like an 11 or above. That's a priority. One council member gave it a 2.
Yeah, and the same council member that voted against purchasing the building.
And Chris Cargo is a free market proponent. I mean, this is public knowledge. It's not, it's what his job is. He is very in support from my understanding from reading the policies, that his nonprofit is working to forward is he believes that, free market for schools, public funds should be used to support private schools, public funds should be used for, like, the free market should speak.
Should drive everything.
Should drive everything. And to your point of, is this about budget? Is there another venue forcing it to go to a district instead
Takes
of,
the money out of.
it takes the money out of the
However
city
much their
council's
budget
budget?
is, goes out of the city.
But it puts more burden on the taxpayers.
Yes,
Sure,
Right,
Who are his constituents.
which is why they put it in the hands of the taxpayers to make that decision. Citizens have to come up with a 10%, the petition and all that kind of
levy
stuff.
and
So they're the ones that have to decide to put that burden on themselves.
Do you have a motion to extend or we're going to wrap up? Sorry, it's just, it's
Anybody
posted
have-
on 6:30.
Anybody have any closing comments they'd like to make? Or can we feel good with our agenda now?
I probably won't be able to attend the library board meeting next week,
Okay,
and I won't be able to attend the city council meeting.
okay, I'll be
We'll try
there.
to line it up.
Okay. All right. All right, thanks again for being here, guys. And as soon as we get a date, let us know.
I was gonna ask at our agenda meeting tomorrow if we have a date set. For the next joint workshop.
Okay, all right, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to ask for
they did.
I did it anyway.